The morning sun cast long shadows across the school playground as Charlotte walked through the gates alone. Her small hands gripped the straps of her backpack tightly, and her eyes remained fixed on the ground ahead. At 10 years old, she had already learned that keeping to herself was safer than trying to make friends. Charlotte had always been different from other children her age. While her classmates laughed and played together during recess, she preferred to sit quietly under the large oak tree near the school fence, reading books or sketching in her notebook. Her teachers often commented on how mature she seemed for her age, but they didn't understand the weight she carried on her young shoulders. The security guard, Mr. Johnson, noticed Charlotte every morning as she entered the school grounds. He had been working at Riverside Elementary for 15 years and had seen thousands of children pass through those gates. But Charlotte was different. There was something in her eyes that reminded him of his own daughter, Kate, who had faced her own challenges growing up. Johnson remembered the day everything changed for Kate. She had been around Charlotte's age when the doctors discovered something unusual during a routine medical scan. The image had shown something that would alter the course of their family's life forever. Now, watching Charlotte walk alone each day, he couldn't shake the feeling that this little girl was carrying a burden similar to what his own family had endured. Charlotte's mother, Sarah, had always been protective of her daughter, perhaps more than necessary. She insisted on walking Charlotte to school every morning until recently, when Charlotte had begged to walk alone like the other children. Sarah had reluctantly agreed, but she watched from their apartment window until Charlotte disappeared around the corner. The family had moved to this neighborhood 6 months ago, seeking a fresh start. Sarah worked double shifts at the local hospital to make ends meet, leaving Charlotte in the care of her elderly grandmother most afternoons. The move had been difficult for Charlotte, who struggled to adapt to new surroundings and make new friends. In her previous school, Charlotte had been popular and outgoing. She had been part of the school choir and had even won a prize for her artwork at the annual school fair. But something had happened during their last few months in their old town that had changed everything. Sarah rarely spoke about it, but Charlotte remembered the hushed conversations between her mother and the doctors, the worried looks, and the sudden decision to move away. Mr. George's own discovery. Johnson began to take special notice of Charlotte's daily routine. She arrived at school exactly at 8:15 every morning, always alone, and left the same way each afternoon. During lunch breaks, he would see her sitting by herself, often staring into the distance as if lost in thought. Other children occasionally approached her, but Charlotte seemed to have built an invisible wall around herself. One particularly rainy Tuesday morning, Mr. Johnson noticed that Charlotte was walking slower than usual. Her shoulders were slumped, and she kept stopping to look back down the street. When she finally reached the school entrance, he could see that her eyes were red from crying. Something inside him stirred, a paternal instinct that reminded him of all the times he had comforted Kate during her difficult moments. Charlotte's teacher, Mrs. Martinez, had also begun to worry about the quiet girl in her classroom. Charlotte was an excellent student, always completing her assignments on time and scoring high on tests. But she never raised her hand to answer questions, never participated in group activities willingly, and seemed to fade into the background whenever possible. During art class, Charlotte's drawings revealed glimpses of her inner world. She often drew solitary figures standing against vast, empty landscapes. Her use of dark colors and shadowy figures concerned Mrs. Pale Martinez, who had seen similar patterns in other children dealing with trauma or significant life changes. The school counselor, Dr. Jelinski. Rebecca Stone had tried reaching out to Charlotte several times. Each attempt was met with polite but distant responses. Charlotte would answer questions with the minimum required words, and never volunteered any additional information about her feelings or experiences. Dr. Stone noted in Charlotte's file that the child seemed to be carrying emotional baggage that was unusual for someone her age. Charlotte's grandmother, Elena, was perhaps the only person who could coax genuine smiles from the young girl. Elena would pick Charlotte up from school 3 days a week and take her to the small park near their apartment. There, Charlotte would sometimes forget her worries and play on the swings or feed the ducks in the pond. These moments of childhood joy were becoming increasingly rare. Elena had lived through many hardships in her 78 years, including raising Sarah as a single mother after her husband's death. She recognized the signs of a child carrying adult worries and tried her best to provide Charlotte with the stability and love she needed. But even Elena was concerned about the dramatic change in Charlotte's personality since their move. The medical records that Sarah kept locked in a filing cabinet told a story that Charlotte was too young to fully understand. The scans and test results painted a picture of a family dealing with genetic concerns that could affect multiple generations. Sarah lived in constant fear of what the future might hold for her daughter and struggled with when and how to explain the situation to Charlotte. Mr. Turkey. Johnson's own experience with Kate had taught him that children are often more resilient than adults give them credit for, but they need support and understanding to navigate difficult situations. Kate had eventually overcome her challenges, but it had taken years of patience, love, and professional help. Now a successful college student studying to become a teacher, Kate often reminded her father that his support during those difficult years had made all the difference. As the weeks passed, Mr. Johnson found himself looking forward to seeing Charlotte each morning, not just as part of his security duties, but because he genuinely cared about her well-being. He began to greet her with a gentle smile and a warm, "Good morning, Charlotte," hoping to brighten her day even slightly. Charlotte initially seemed surprised by the attention, but gradually began to return his greetings with small nods and eventually soft-spoken responses. These brief interactions became the highlight of both their mornings, though neither spoke about the deeper connection they were forming. The other security guards at the school began to notice Mr. Johnson's special interest in Charlotte. Some teased him about having a favorite student, but others understood his compassionate nature. Mr. Johnson had always been the type of person who looked out for children who seemed to need extra care and attention. Sarah remained unaware of these small but significant interactions between her daughter and the school security guard. She was so focused on keeping their family's private matters confidential that she hadn't realized how isolated Charlotte had become. The decision to maintain their privacy was understandable, given their circumstances. But it had come at the cost of Charlotte's social development and emotional well-being. As autumn turned to winter, Charlotte's solitary walks to school became even more poignant. The bare trees and gray skies seemed to mirror her internal landscape, and Mr. Johnson couldn't help but worry about what the upcoming holiday season might bring for a child who seemed so disconnected from the joy that typically surrounded children her age. The school's upcoming winter concert presented an opportunity for Charlotte to reconnect with her love of music, but Mrs. Martinez noticed that Charlotte had not signed up to participate. When asked about it, Charlotte simply shook her head and mumbled something about not being interested. This response was particularly concerning because Charlotte's previous school records indicated she had been an enthusiastic participant in musical activities. Mr. Johnson began to document his observations about Charlotte in a small notebook he kept in his security office. He wasn't sure why he felt compelled to track her daily patterns, but something told him that this information might be important later. He noted her arrival and departure times, her general demeanor, and any unusual incidents or behaviors he observed. The connection between Charlotte's situation and his memories of Kate's medical scans grew stronger each day. Mr. Johnson found himself researching childhood medical conditions and their psychological impact on families. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that Charlotte's isolation was connected to some kind of medical or genetic concern that her family was struggling to address. Charlotte's artwork continued to evolve throughout the semester, becoming increasingly complex and emotionally charged. She began incorporating medical imagery into her drawings, though she probably wasn't fully aware of what she was depicting. Martinez saved several of these pieces, sensing they might be important clues to understanding Charlotte's emotional state. The winter holidays approached, and Charlotte's behavior became even more withdrawn. While other children buzzed with excitement about upcoming celebrations and time off from school, Charlotte seemed to dread the approaching break. Johnson wondered if the holidays held particular significance or painful memories for Charlotte's family. During the last week before winter break, Charlotte arrived at school with a small wrapped gift. To everyone's surprise, she approached Mr. Johnson and quietly handed it to him. Inside was a hand-drawn picture of the school entrance with two figures standing together, a tall man in a security uniform and a small girl with a backpack. At the bottom, in careful child's handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for noticing me." This simple gesture broke down the emotional walls that Mr. Johnson had been carefully maintaining. He realized that his instinct to protect and care for Charlotte had been reciprocated, and that their brief daily interactions had meant as much to her as they had to him. The gift also confirmed his growing suspicion that Charlotte was much more aware of her surroundings and relationships than she typically let on. The revelation that Charlotte had been observing and appreciating his attention made Mr. Perot Johnson even more determined to find a way to help her. He began to consider reaching out to the school administration or social services, but he knew he needed to be careful not to overstep his boundaries or potentially make Charlotte's situation worse. As the students left for winter break, Charlotte's parting words to Mr. Johnson were particularly memorable. She looked up at him with her serious brown eyes and said, "I hope you have a good holiday, Mr. Johnson. Thank you for being kind to me when nobody else noticed I needed it." These words would stay with him throughout the break and ultimately motivate him to take action when school resumed. During the winter break, Mr. Johnson couldn't stop thinking about Charlotte's gift and her heartfelt words. He spent hours researching childhood trauma, medical conditions that might affect families, and resources available for children in difficult situations. His wife, Maria, noticed his preoccupation and encouraged him to trust his instincts about helping Charlotte when school resumed. Kate, now 22 and studying education, came home for the holidays and listened intently as her father described his concerns about Charlotte. The parallels between Charlotte's situation and Kate's own childhood experiences were striking. Kate had also become withdrawn and isolated when their family first learned about her medical condition, though she had eventually learned to cope with professional help and family support. Kate's medical condition had been discovered during a routine scan when she was 9 years old. The doctors had found genetic markers that indicated a high probability of developing a serious autoimmune disorder later in life. The uncertainty and fear surrounding this discovery had affected the entire family for years. Kate had struggled with anxiety and depression as a child, wondering if she would live a normal life or if her condition would eventually limit her opportunities and relationships. The scanning technology that had revealed Kate's condition was relatively new at the time, and doctors were still learning how to interpret and communicate such findings to families. The Johnson family had been told that Kate had a 70% chance of developing the disorder by age 30, but there was no way to predict exactly when or how severely it might manifest. During Kate's teenage years, she had participated in several research studies to help doctors better understand her condition. These studies involved regular scans, blood tests, and psychological evaluations. While the research was valuable for medical science, it had been emotionally challenging for Kate to constantly be reminded of her uncertain future. Now, as a young adult, Kate had learned to live with the uncertainty. She took preventive medications, maintained a healthy lifestyle, and pursued her dreams of becoming a teacher. She had chosen education as her career partly because her own experiences had taught her how important it is for children to have supportive adults in their lives during difficult times. When Kate heard about Charlotte, she immediately offered to help her father find ways to support the young girl. She suggested that Mr. Johnson speak with the school counselor about his concerns and possibly arrange for Charlotte to receive additional emotional support at school. Kate also volunteered to visit the school and shared her own story if it might help Charlotte feel less alone. Mr. Johnson decided to use his vacation time during winter break to research Charlotte's family situation more thoroughly. He learned that Sarah worked as a medical technician at the local hospital and that they had moved from a city 3 hours away. He also discovered that Charlotte had been an honor student at her previous school and had participated in numerous extracurricular activities. The dramatic change in Charlotte's behavior and social engagement suggested that something significant had happened before their move. Mr. Johnson suspected that medical testing or scan results might have revealed concerning information about Charlotte's health or genetic predisposition to certain conditions. This would explain her family's decision to relocate and their apparent desire to maintain privacy about their personal situation. Through his research, Mr. Johnson also learned about the psychological impact that genetic testing and medical uncertainty can have on children and families. Many children who learn they have genetic risk factors for serious diseases experience anxiety, depression, and social withdrawal. They may struggle with questions about their future, their relationships, and their sense of identity. Sarah had indeed been dealing with exactly these challenges. 6 months before their move, Charlotte had undergone genetic testing as part of a routine family medical history evaluation. The results had shown that Charlotte carried the same genetic markers that had affected several members of Sarah's family, including Sarah's own mother, who had died from complications related to an autoimmune disorder when Sarah was Charlotte's age. The genetic counselor had explained that carrying these markers didn't guarantee Charlotte would develop the condition, but it significantly increased her risk. The uncertainty had been overwhelming for Sarah, who had watched her own mother struggle with the disease and ultimately lose her battle with it. The decision to move and start fresh had been Sarah's attempt to give Charlotte a normal childhood away from the medical community that knew their family history. However, Sarah's protective instincts had inadvertently isolated Charlotte from potential sources of support. The secrecy surrounding their situation had prevented Charlotte from processing her fears and concerns in a healthy way. Without understanding why her mother seemed constantly worried and why they had suddenly left everything familiar behind, Charlotte had internalized the anxiety and begun to withdraw from social connections. Elena, Charlotte's grandmother, had tried to convince Sarah to seek counseling for Charlotte, but Sarah was afraid that involving mental health professionals might somehow affect Charlotte's future insurance coverage or educational opportunities. This fear, while understandable, had prevented Charlotte from receiving the support she desperately needed. During the winter break, Charlotte spent most of her time at home with Elena, while Sarah worked overtime shifts at the hospital. Elena noticed that Charlotte often stared out the window toward the school, as if missing the routine and structure that it provided. Charlotte also asked repeatedly when Mr. Johnson would be back at work, indicating that their brief daily interactions had become an important source of stability in her otherwise uncertain world. Elena began to understand that Charlotte's connection with Mr. Johnson represented something she had been missing since their move. A caring adult who noticed and valued her as an individual. Elena decided to have an honest conversation with Sarah about Charlotte's need for more social support and emotional guidance. The conversation between Elena and Sarah was difficult, but necessary. Elena gently pointed out that Charlotte's withdrawal and isolation were becoming more pronounced, and that their efforts to protect her from knowing about her genetic situation might actually be causing more harm than good. Elena suggested that age-appropriate honesty about their family's medical history might help Charlotte understand why her life had changed so dramatically. Sarah initially resisted Elena's suggestions, fearing that telling Charlotte about her genetic markers would cause unnecessary anxiety and rob her of her childhood innocence. However, Elena argued that Charlotte was already anxious and confused, and that providing her with truthful information and professional support might actually help her cope better with their situation. Meanwhile, Mr. Johnson had begun developing a plan to help Charlotte when school resumed. He researched the school district's policies regarding student support services and learned about various programs available for children dealing with medical or family challenges. He also identified several community resources that might be helpful for Charlotte's family. Mr. Johnson's wife, Maria, suggested that he approach the situation carefully by first building a stronger relationship with Charlotte and then gradually determining how best to connect her with appropriate support services. Maria reminded her husband that their success in helping Kate had come from taking small, consistent steps rather than trying to solve everything at once. Kate offered to create a simple children's book about living with medical uncertainty that might help Charlotte understand that she wasn't alone in facing such challenges. Kate had learned during her own journey that many children struggle with similar issues and that sharing stories and experiences can be incredibly healing and empowering. As the winter break drew to a close, both Mr. Johnson and Charlotte looked forward to returning to school. Their brief daily interactions had become meaningful to both of them, though neither fully understood the depth of connection they had formed. Mr. Johnson represented stability and caring attention in Charlotte's uncertain world, while Charlotte had reawakened his protective instincts and reminded him of the importance of paying attention to children who might be struggling silently. Elena continued her efforts to convince Sarah to seek professional support for Charlotte. She researched local family counselors who specialized in genetic counseling and childhood anxiety, and she compiled information about support groups for families dealing with genetic risk factors. Elena was determined to help Sarah understand that protecting Charlotte meant providing her with tools to cope with their situation, not hiding it from her. The night before school resumed, Charlotte sat at her bedroom window, looking toward the school building in the distance. She thought about Mr. Swartzy, Johnson's kind smile, and wondered if he had enjoyed his vacation. She also thought about the other children in her class and wondered if any of them ever felt as alone and confused as she did. Charlotte had begun to have strange dreams during the break, dreams that seemed to involve medical equipment and worried adults having hushed conversations. She didn't understand these dreams, but they left her feeling anxious and uncertain. She wished she had someone to talk to about these confusing feelings and thoughts. Sarah had also been struggling during the break. The isolation she had created around their family situation was taking a toll on her own mental health, and she was beginning to realize that her approach might not be sustainable or healthy for any of them. She had started to consider Elena's suggestions about seeking professional support, though she remained fearful about the potential consequences. The genetic counseling appointment that Sarah had been postponing for months continued to weigh on her mind. The counselor had recommended regular follow-up appointments to monitor Charlotte's development and provide ongoing support for their family. Sarah's decision to skip these appointments had been motivated by a desire to minimize Charlotte's exposure to medical settings, but she was beginning to understand that avoidance might not be the best strategy. As the winter break ended, both Charlotte and Mr. Johnson were unaware of how much their lives were about to change. The foundation of trust and care they had built through their simple daily interactions would soon become the basis for a more significant relationship that would ultimately help Charlotte begin to heal from the trauma and uncertainty she had been carrying alone. The school counselor, Dr. Stone, had also spent part of her break reviewing Charlotte's file and considering new approaches to help her engage more fully with school life and social relationships. Dr. Stone had noticed the positive impact that Mr. Johnson's attention seemed to have on Charlotte, and she was beginning to develop ideas about how to build upon that relationship to provide Charlotte with additional support. When school resumed after winter break, Charlotte arrived 15 minutes early on the first day, clearly eager to reestablish her routine with Mr. Johnson. She had carefully prepared a small thank you card for him, decorated with drawings of snowflakes and winter scenes. When Mr. Johnson saw her approaching the school gates, his face lit up with genuine pleasure at seeing her again. Their reunion was warm but understated, as both had become accustomed to communicating through subtle gestures and brief exchanges. Charlotte handed him the card with a shy smile, and Mr. Johnson accepted it with the same careful attention he had given her previous gift. Inside, Charlotte had written a simple message: "I missed our morning talks. I hope your family had a good holiday." Mr. Johnson realized that their brief daily greetings had meant far more to Charlotte than he had initially understood. Her use of the phrase morning talks revealed that she considered their interactions to be meaningful conversations, even though they typically exchanged only a few words. This insight strengthened his resolve to find appropriate ways to support her. During the first week back at school, Mr. Johnson noticed that Charlotte seemed more animated than she had before the break. She made more eye contact during their morning exchanges, and she occasionally lingered near the security office during lunch breaks, as if hoping for additional conversation. These small changes suggested that their relationship had become an important source of emotional support for her. Stone, the school counselor, approached Mr. Johnson during the second week of January with some concerns about Charlotte's continued isolation from her peers. She had observed that while Charlotte seemed more comfortable with Mr. Johnson, she remained withdrawn in classroom settings and continued to avoid social interactions with other children. Mr. Johnson shared his observations about Charlotte's behavior patterns and his growing concern that she might be dealing with family medical issues similar to what his own daughter Kate had experienced. Dr. Stone listened carefully and agreed that Charlotte exhibited many signs of a child struggling with anxiety and uncertainty about health-related matters. Together, they developed a plan to gradually increase Charlotte's access to emotional support at school without violating her family's apparent desire for privacy. Dr. Stone would begin by inviting Charlotte to help with simple tasks in the counseling office, creating opportunities for informal conversation and relationship building. Meanwhile, Kate had completed the children's book she had promised to write about, Living with Medical Uncertainty. The story featured a young girl named Emma, who learns that she carries genetic markers for a condition that might affect her later in life. The book focused on Emma's journey to understand that having risk factors didn't define her worth or limit her potential for happiness and success. Kate designed the book to be age-appropriate while addressing common fears and misconceptions that children might have about genetic conditions. She included sections about the importance of talking to trusted adults, seeking support from family and friends, and focusing on the present rather than worrying excessively about uncertain future possibilities. Mr. Johnson reviewed Kate's book and was impressed by her ability to address complex medical and emotional topics in language that a 10-year-old could understand. This is about history. He began to consider how he might share this resource with Charlotte, though he knew he needed to proceed carefully to avoid overstepping appropriate boundaries. Elena's persistence finally convinced Sarah to schedule an appointment with a family counselor who specialized in genetic counseling and childhood anxiety. The appointment was set for late January, and Sarah reluctantly agreed to bring Charlotte along. Elena hoped that professional guidance might help their family develop healthier ways to cope with their situation. Charlotte continued to show artistic talent in her drawings, but Mrs. Martinez noticed that her recent artwork had begun to include more hopeful elements, alongside the darker themes she had previously explored. Charlotte had started drawing pictures that included friendly adult figures and scenes of children receiving help and support from caring grown-ups. One particularly meaningful drawing showed a school building with a security guard standing outside, surrounded by children who appeared happy and safe. Mrs. Martinez interpreted this as evidence that Charlotte was beginning to associate school with security and positive adult relationships, largely due to her connection with Mr. Johnson. Dr. Stone's strategy of involving Charlotte in counseling office activities proved successful. Charlotte began visiting the counseling office twice a week to help organize materials and assist with simple administrative tasks. These visits provided natural opportunities for Dr. Stone to engage Charlotte in casual conversation and begin building trust. During one of these visits, Charlotte mentioned that she sometimes worried about getting sick, like some people in her family had. This was the first time she had voluntarily shared information about her personal concerns, and Dr. Stone recognized it as a significant breakthrough. She responded with gentle questions that encouraged Charlotte to express more of her feelings and fears. Charlotte revealed that she didn't fully understand why her family had moved or why her mother seemed constantly worried, but she had picked up enough information to know that their situation involved medical concerns. She expressed frustration about not being told what was happening and fear that something terrible might be wrong with her. Dr. Stone assured Charlotte that having questions and concerns about family medical matters was completely normal and that many children her age struggled with similar feelings. She also explained that adults sometimes try to protect children from worrying by not sharing information, even when the children are already aware that something is wrong. The conversation with Dr. Stone helped Charlotte understand that her feelings of confusion and anxiety were valid responses to her situation. For the first time since their move, Charlotte felt that an adult was taking her concerns seriously and treating her as capable of understanding age-appropriate information about her family's circumstances. Mr. Johnson noticed the positive changes in Charlotte's demeanor following her sessions with Dr. Stone. She seemed less burdened and more willing to engage in brief conversations during their morning encounters. She also began asking questions about his family, showing genuine interest in learning about other people's experiences. When Charlotte asked about Kate, Mr. Johnson decided to share some general information about his daughter's childhood medical challenges and her eventual success in overcoming associated emotional difficulties. He was careful to present the information in a way that was hopeful and encouraging, emphasizing Kate's resilience and current happiness. Charlotte listened intently to Mr. Kate's ability, Johnson's stories about Kate, and she asked thoughtful questions about how Kate had learned to cope with uncertainty about her health. These conversations marked the beginning of Charlotte's understanding that other families had dealt with similar situations, and that children could successfully navigate medical challenges. The appointment with the family counselor finally arrived, and Sarah brought Charlotte to the session with considerable anxiety about how her daughter would react to discussing their family's genetic situation. The counselor, Dr. Patricia Wells, had extensive experience helping families communicate about genetic risk factors and medical uncertainty. Wells began the session by meeting with Charlotte alone for a few minutes, giving her an opportunity to share her own perceptions and concerns without feeling pressured by her mother's presence. Charlotte surprised both Dr. Wells and Sarah by immediately expressing relief that they were finally going to talk about the secret that everyone knows but nobody talks about. Charlotte's directness revealed that she had been far more aware of their family's medical situation than Sarah had realized. She knew that they had moved because of something about getting sick, and she had been frightened by the secrecy surrounding the topic. Her greatest fear was that she was going to die young, like her grandmother had. When Sarah joined the conversation, Dr. Doris said, Wells guided them through an age-appropriate discussion of genetic markers, risk factors, and current medical understanding of Charlotte's condition. Charlotte learned that carrying genetic markers meant she had a higher chance of developing certain conditions, but that many people with similar markers lived healthy, normal lives. Dr. Wells explained that Charlotte's risk factors were similar to having a family history of diabetes or heart disease, higher chance of developing the condition, but not a certainty, and many things could be done to reduce the risk and manage any symptoms that might develop. This comparison helped Charlotte understand her situation in a less frightening context. The counseling session also addressed Charlotte's emotional responses to their family situation. Dr. Wells validated Charlotte's feelings of confusion and anxiety while teaching her specific strategies for managing worry about uncertain future possibilities. Charlotte learned breathing techniques, positive self-talk methods, and ways to focus on present activities rather than future fears. Sarah was amazed by Charlotte's maturity and insight during the counseling session. Her daughter's ability to articulate her fears and ask thoughtful questions demonstrated that she had been ready for honest conversation about their situation for months. Sarah realized that her attempts to protect Charlotte through secrecy had actually increased her daughter's anxiety and isolation. Following the counseling appointment, Charlotte seemed like a different child. The burden of carrying unknown fears and unexpressed concerns had been lifted, and she was able to begin processing her situation in a healthier way. She started sleeping better, and her appetite improved noticeably. At school, Charlotte's teachers and Mr. Johnson immediately noticed positive changes in her behavior and demeanor. She seemed more relaxed, made better eye contact with adults, and even began showing subtle signs of interest in her classmates' activities. The improvement was gradual but unmistakable. Dr. Stone continued her regular sessions with Charlotte, helping her develop coping skills and process her feelings about living with genetic risk factors. Charlotte began to understand that her situation, while challenging, was manageable and didn't define her entire identity or limit her potential for happiness and success. Charlotte's artwork evolved dramatically following the counseling session. Her drawings began to include brighter colors, more complex social scenes, and images of families having conversations and supporting each other. The solitary figures that had dominated her previous artwork were gradually replaced by pictures showing connections between people. Mr. Johnson felt enormous relief as he watched Charlotte's transformation unfold. His instinct to care for her had been validated, and his patient, consistent attention had provided her with a foundation of adult support that had proven crucial during her healing process. Kate's book became a valuable resource that Charlotte read repeatedly, finding comfort in Emma's story and her successful journey through similar challenges. Elena was overjoyed to see her granddaughter returning to the cheerful, curious child she had been before their family crisis began. The decision to seek professional help had been the turning point that allowed their family to begin healing and moving forward together. Charlotte's journey toward understanding and acceptance was just beginning, but the foundation for recovery had been firmly established. February brought remarkable changes to Charlotte's daily life at school. The combination of family counseling, regular sessions with Dr. Stone, and her continued connection with Mr. Johnson had created a support system that allowed her to begin rebuilding her confidence and social skills. For the first time since their move, Charlotte started showing interest in joining school activities. Mrs. Martinez noticed that Charlotte had begun raising her hand during class discussions, though her contributions were still tentative and brief. The teacher made a conscious effort to call on Charlotte regularly and praise her insights, helping to rebuild her academic confidence. Charlotte's test scores had always been excellent, but now her classroom participation was finally beginning to match her intellectual abilities. The most significant breakthrough came when Charlotte expressed interest in joining the school's art club. Mrs. Martinez had been displaying some of Charlotte's recent artwork on the classroom bulletin board, and several classmates had commented positively on her drawings. One girl named Maya had specifically asked Charlotte to teach her how to draw horses, which were featured prominently in several of Charlotte's pieces. Charlotte's conversation with Maya marked her first meaningful peer interaction since starting at the new school. Maya was a friendly, outgoing girl who had recently moved to the area herself, though under much happier circumstances than Charlotte's family had experienced. Their shared experience of being newcomers provided common ground for building a friendship. Mr. Johnson observed Charlotte's growing friendship with Maya with great satisfaction. During their morning encounters, Charlotte began mentioning Maya's activities and interests, demonstrating that she was developing social connections beyond her relationships with adults. These conversations were longer and more animated than their previous exchanges had been. Kate visited the school in mid-February to meet Charlotte and share her story in person. Dr. Stone had arranged the meeting as part of Charlotte's ongoing support plan, believing that connecting with a young adult who had successfully navigated similar challenges would be beneficial for Charlotte's healing process. The meeting between Kate and Charlotte exceeded everyone's expectations. Charlotte was initially shy, but Kate's warm, genuine manner quickly put her at ease. Kate shared age-appropriate details about her own childhood experiences with genetic testing and medical uncertainty, emphasizing how she had learned to focus on her dreams and goals rather than her health concerns. Kate brought along photo albums showing her childhood activities, school achievements, college experiences, and current life as an education student. Charlotte was particularly impressed by pictures of Kate performing in school plays, winning academic awards, and spending time with friends and family. These images provided concrete evidence that genetic risk factors didn't prevent someone from living a full, successful life. During their conversation, Charlotte asked Kate thoughtful questions about how she had learned to stop worrying about her health condition. Kate explained that she had developed specific strategies for managing anxiety, including focusing on activities she enjoyed, setting goals for herself, and surrounding herself with supportive people who cared about her well-being. Kate also shared the children's book she had written, reading it aloud to Charlotte and discussing how Emma's story paralleled Charlotte's own experiences. Charlotte was fascinated to learn that Kate had written the book specifically to help children like herself, and she felt honored to be among the first people to hear the complete story. The impact of meeting Kate was immediately apparent in Charlotte's behavior and outlook. She began talking about future goals and dreams, something she hadn't done since before their family's medical crisis began. Charlotte expressed interest in becoming an artist or art teacher, inspired partly by Kate's pursuit of education and partly by her own rediscovered passion for creative expression. Charlotte's friendship with Maya continued to develop throughout February. Maya invited Charlotte to spend Saturday afternoons at her house, where they worked on art projects together and played board games. These social activities represented Charlotte's first recreational interactions with peers in over 6 months. Maya's family welcomed Charlotte warmly, though they were unaware of the specific challenges she had been facing. Maya's parents, David and Lisa Chen, simply saw Charlotte as a quiet, well-mannered child who seemed to bring out the best in their daughter. They were happy to provide Charlotte with a supportive environment for rebuilding her social confidence. Sarah initially felt anxious about Charlotte spending time at Maya's house, fearing that questions might arise about their family's medical history or their reasons for moving. However, Dr. Wells had encouraged Sarah to allow Charlotte to develop normal friendships, emphasizing that social connections were crucial for her emotional health and development. The friendship with Maya also helped Charlotte practice sharing age-appropriate information about her situation. Dr. Quizza Stone had worked with Charlotte to develop simple explanations she could use if questions arose about her family's circumstances. Charlotte learned to say that her family had moved because of medical concerns, but that she was healthy and happy now. Charlotte's increased confidence began to extend beyond her friendship with Maya. She started participating more actively in group activities during art club, and even volunteered to help with the planning for the spring art show. Mrs. Martinez was delighted to see Charlotte taking initiative and demonstrating leadership skills. The spring art show became a focal point for Charlotte's continued healing and growth. She decided to submit several pieces that reflected her journey from isolation to connection, including drawings that showed the evolution from solitary figures to families and friends supporting each other. The artwork served as both personal therapy and public expression of her experiences. Mr. Johnson continued to play an important role in Charlotte's daily routine, though their relationship had evolved as her circle of support expanded. Their morning conversations now included updates about her friendship with Maya, her art club activities, and her plans for the spring art show. Charlotte had begun to view Mr. Johnson as a trusted mentor rather than her only source of adult support. Dr. Stone gradually reduced the frequency of Charlotte's counseling sessions as her emotional stability improved and her coping skills strengthened. Charlotte had learned to identify her feelings, express her concerns appropriately, and use specific techniques to manage anxiety when it arose. She had also developed realistic understanding of her genetic situation and its implications for her future. Elena noticed dramatic improvements in Charlotte's behavior at home as well. Charlotte had resumed many activities she had enjoyed before their move, including reading fiction books, drawing for pleasure, and helping Elena with cooking and gardening projects. The anxious, withdrawn child who had emerged from their family crisis was gradually being replaced by a more mature but fundamentally happy version of her former self. Sarah's relationship with Charlotte also improved significantly as they learned to communicate more openly about their family's medical situation. Regular family counseling sessions with Dr. Bryan Wells had taught them both how to discuss Charlotte's genetic markers and health monitoring in ways that were informative but not overwhelming or frightening. Charlotte began participating in medical appointments as an active, informed patient rather than a passive recipient of care. She learned about preventive measures she could take to reduce her health risks, including proper nutrition, regular exercise, stress management, and routine medical monitoring. This knowledge gave her a sense of control over her situation, rather than helpless acceptance of uncertain fate. The transformation in Charlotte's artwork became a powerful indicator of her emotional healing. Her drawings now featured vibrant colors, complex social interactions, and optimistic themes. She created a series of pictures showing children and adults working together, families having conversations, and individuals pursuing their dreams despite facing challenges. Charlotte's academic performance reached new heights as her emotional stability improved. She began participating in advanced reading groups, volunteering to present projects to her classmates, and expressing interest in entering academic competitions. Mrs. Gold Martinez recommended Charlotte for the school's Gifted and Talented program based on her demonstrated abilities and renewed engagement. As spring approached, Charlotte started making plans for the summer months that reflected her growing confidence and expanding social connections. She wanted to attend art camp, spend more time with Maya, and visit Kate at her college campus. These plans demonstrated that Charlotte was thinking about her future with optimism rather than fear. The spring art show provided Charlotte with an opportunity to share her story with the broader school community through her artwork. She created an exhibit called Finding My Voice that displayed pieces representing different stages of her emotional journey. The exhibit included written explanations that described how art had helped her process difficult feelings and connect with supportive people. Mr. Johnson attended the spring art show with his wife Maria, and they were both moved by Charlotte's artistic representation of her healing process. One particular piece showed a school security guard and a young girl having a conversation, with rays of sunlight breaking through dark clouds in the background. The accompanying description thanked special adults who notice children who need extra kindness. Charlotte's presentation about her artwork at the Spring Art Show marked a significant milestone in her recovery. She spoke confidently about how art had helped her work through challenging emotions, and how supportive relationships had made it possible for her to heal and grow. Her presentation received enthusiastic applause from students, teachers, and families in attendance. The success of Charlotte's art show presentation led to new opportunities for leadership and service at school. She was invited to mentor younger students who were interested in art, and she began helping Dr. Charlotte's Stone create materials for other children who might be dealing with family medical concerns or other challenging situations. By the end of the school year, Charlotte had transformed from an isolated, anxious child into a confident, socially connected student with strong academic performance and meaningful relationships with both peers and adults. Her journey demonstrated the power of patient, consistent support from caring individuals and the importance of honest communication within families facing medical challenges. As the school year drew to a close, Charlotte had become a completely different child from the isolated 10-year-old who had walked through the school gates alone 8 months earlier. Her transformation was evident not only to those who had been closely involved in her journey, but to anyone who observed her interactions with classmates, teachers, and adults throughout the school community. The final weeks of the school year brought opportunities for Charlotte to demonstrate her newfound confidence and leadership abilities. She was elected by her classmates to serve as the student representative for the 5th grade graduation planning committee, a position that required public speaking skills and collaborative decision-making abilities that would have been unimaginable for her just months earlier. Charlotte's friendship with Maya had deepened into a genuine bond that enriched both girls' lives. Maya had gradually learned about some of the challenges Charlotte's family had faced, and she had responded with the kind of unconditional acceptance and support that demonstrated her emotional maturity. Their friendship had become a model for other students of how to support classmates who might be dealing with difficult situations. The summer plans that Charlotte and Maya developed together reflected Charlotte's complete reintegration into normal childhood activities and social relationships. They enrolled in the same art camp, planned weekly visits to the community center, and organized a neighborhood art club for younger children. Charlotte's enthusiasm for these activities demonstrated her renewed ability to anticipate future experiences with excitement rather than anxiety. Mr. Johnson's role in Charlotte's life had evolved from primary emotional support to beloved mentor and family friend. Charlotte's mother, Sarah, had formally thanked him for his patient attention during Charlotte's most difficult period, acknowledging that his consistent kindness had provided crucial stability when Charlotte needed it most. The Johnson and Charlotte's families had begun spending time together outside of school, creating broader social connections for everyone involved. Kate had maintained her connection with Charlotte throughout the spring months, serving as both role model and friend. Charlotte regularly sent Kate artwork and updates about her school activities, while Kate shared stories about her college experiences and her progress toward becoming a teacher. Their relationship demonstrated the positive impact that mentorship connections could have on children facing medical or family challenges. Dr. Stone documented Charlotte's case as an example of successful intervention for children dealing with genetic counseling and family medical stress. Charlotte's recovery had been facilitated by multiple factors: early identification of her emotional needs, consistent support from caring adults, professional counseling that addressed both practical and emotional aspects of her situation, and gradual reintegration into normal social activities with peer support. The school's approach to supporting Charlotte had also evolved into a broader program for identifying and assisting other students who might be dealing with hidden family challenges. Johnson's observational skills and caring attention had become a model for other staff members, leading to increased awareness of students who might benefit from additional emotional support. Charlotte's final presentation to her fifth-grade class focused on the theme, "How Challenges Can Make Us Stronger." She shared age-appropriate information about her family's medical situation and her own emotional journey, emphasizing the importance of seeking help from trusted adults and maintaining hope even during difficult times. Her presentation inspired several classmates to share their own stories of overcoming challenges, creating a supportive classroom environment that benefited all students. The impact of Charlotte's story extended beyond her immediate school community. Dr. Wells began using Charlotte's case as an example in her training programs for genetic counselors, demonstrating the importance of addressing children's emotional needs alongside medical information. Kate incorporated lessons from Charlotte's experience into her education coursework, developing a better understanding of how teachers can support students facing family medical challenges. Elena's role in advocating for Charlotte's needs had proven crucial to the family's healing process. Her persistence in encouraging Sarah to seek professional help had been the catalyst for positive change. Elena's wisdom about the importance of honest communication and professional support had saved Charlotte from potentially years of unnecessary emotional suffering. Sarah's own growth throughout Charlotte's healing process had been remarkable. She had learned to balance appropriate medical caution with allowing Charlotte to live a normal childhood. Sarah said, kissing Dan's by Nama. Sarah had developed better communication skills for discussing genetic risk factors with Charlotte, and she had built connections with other families facing similar situations through support groups recommended by Dr. Wells. Charlotte's academic achievements during her final months of fifth grade exceeded everyone's expectations. She was selected to participate in the district's summer enrichment program for gifted students, and she received the school's award for Most Improved Student in Social Engagement. Her teachers unanimously recommended her for advanced placement classes in middle school. The art therapy techniques that Charlotte had learned through her work with Mrs. Martinez and Dr. Brothers Stone had become permanent coping strategies that she continued to use for managing stress and expressing complex emotions. Charlotte had developed a sophisticated understanding of how creative expression could serve both personal healing and communication with others. Charlotte's relationship with medical care had been completely transformed through her healing process. She now attended medical appointments as an informed, active participant rather than a fearful patient. She understood her genetic markers and risk factors in age-appropriate terms, and she had learned specific strategies for maintaining her health and managing any symptoms that might develop in the future. The summer art camp that Charlotte attended with Maya became another opportunity for continued growth and leadership development. Charlotte was selected to be a peer mentor for younger campers, helping them develop artistic skills while building their confidence. The camp counselors noted Charlotte's exceptional ability to encourage other children who seemed shy or uncertain about their abilities. Charlotte's mentorship work with younger students who were dealing with family challenges became a regular volunteer activity that she continued throughout middle school. Stone facilitated these connections, and Charlotte's ability to relate to other children's experiences while offering hope and practical advice proved invaluable for several families dealing with medical uncertainties. The friendship between Charlotte and Maya remained strong as they transitioned to middle school together. Maya's consistent support during Charlotte's healing process had strengthened both girls' understanding of loyalty, empathy, and the importance of standing by friends during difficult times. Their friendship had become a foundation for both girls' continued social and emotional development. Mr. Ebb Johnson's experience with Charlotte reinforced his commitment to paying attention to students who might be struggling silently. He developed informal partnerships with school counselors and teachers to identify children who might benefit from additional adult attention and support. His wife Maria often commented that helping Charlotte had renewed his sense of purpose and reminded him of the profound impact that caring adults can have on children's lives. Kate's children's book about living with genetic uncertainty was eventually published and distributed to pediatric genetics clinics throughout the region. Charlotte's input during the book's development had been valuable in ensuring that the content addressed real concerns that children might have about genetic testing and medical uncertainty. Charlotte felt proud to have contributed to a resource that could help other families. The spring art show exhibit that Charlotte had created about her emotional journey was preserved by the school as an educational resource for students, families, and staff members. The exhibit served as a powerful reminder that children facing medical challenges could not only recover emotionally, but could also develop increased empathy, resilience, and leadership abilities through their experiences. As Charlotte prepared to enter middle school, her confidence in managing her genetic situation had become a source of strength rather than anxiety. She understood that she would need to continue regular medical monitoring and maintain healthy lifestyle habits, but she no longer viewed these requirements as limitations on her dreams and goals. Instead, she saw them as responsible self-care practices that would help her live the fullest possible life. Charlotte's transformation from an isolated, anxious child to a confident, socially engaged student with strong leadership skills demonstrated the remarkable resilience that children can develop when they receive appropriate support. Her story illustrated the importance of adult attention to children's emotional needs, honest family communication about medical challenges, and professional counseling resources for families dealing with genetic uncertainties. The network of support that had formed around Charlotte during her healing process continued to benefit other children and families facing similar challenges. Mr. Johnson's observational skills, Dr. Stone's counseling expertise, Kate's mentorship approach, and Elena's advocacy wisdom had been combined into a comprehensive model for supporting children through family medical crises. Charlotte entered middle school as a young leader who was committed to using her experiences to help other children facing challenges. She had learned that difficulties could be transformed into sources of strength and compassion, and she was determined to share this understanding with anyone who might benefit from her story. Her journey from isolation to connection had become a testament to the healing power of human caring and the resilience of the human spirit. The morning routine that had begun with a lonely child walking to school alone had evolved into Charlotte arriving with friends, participating in before-school activities, and greeting Mr. Johnson with updates about her latest projects and achievements. The transformation was complete, but the relationships and lessons learned during her healing process would continue to influence Charlotte's life for years to come. Charlotte's story had become proof that with proper support, children facing even significant challenges can not only recover, but can thrive in ways that seemed impossible during their darkest moments.